Well, I'm going to try this again. I just did a video that was, probably 40 minutes long, and I went back to shut it off and realized that we were not recording. So, I am going to try this again. I just went through a whole lesson on how to teach a horse how to put their head on the ground. Now that she already knows how to do it, this little mare, when I was starting the video earlier, was extremely rooty and pushing her head in the beginning of the video and everything, and not listening to my legs, didn't know how to listen to my legs. So what I was teaching her how to do was work off the bit and teaching her how to put her nose to the ground on cue. So what I was doing was teaching her how to give to the bit, for one, because she didn't really know anything about that. So when you asked her, she would push up and root in the bit. So this first exercise, what I did was every time I would hold, and she'd give me that face to lower her head, I would drop the reins. Not drop the reins, but give her pressure, release. So I'm adding pressure, release. Now, once she learned how to do that, then I would, every time I would ask for pressure, I would take my spurs and I would put my toes down and just reach up and tickle, not really move, but just touch the underside of her belly. So I'm going to tickle her with my spurs on her belly. And every time she goes to lower her head, I'm going to release. So this time I'm going to put pressure with the reins and the spurs, tickle, there, she give, so I instantly released. So I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to reach up and tuck, there you go, reach up and touch her belly, and when she gives, I release. I touch, and she releases. Or releases, there we go. So I'm going to ask and release. Every time she drops that head just a little bit, I'm going to release. And I want her originally to touch the ground. So I'm going to reach up, touch, and release. Get her back over here, ask, and release. There we go. Ask and release. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. So what I want to do is teach all of my horses to be able to reach down and lower their head on cue. So that way you can go like this and touch and lower. She likes to put the reins in her mouth. But see right there, that's great. If you can teach horses to be able to lower their head, anything, if their poll, which is right here between their ears, is below their withers, they start to release endorphins that help them relax. So I'm going to ask her to lower her head. Good. Ask her to lower her head. Good. Ask her to lower her head. Ask her to lower her head. Ask her to lower her head. Wait till she drops. There. All the way down. Good. That's what I want. Anything, ask and drop. Ask. I want her to be able to be so sensitive, because she was really dull. I couldn't even kick her to move forward with my spurs. That's how dull she was. So I'm going to just ask her to tickle and release. Ultimately, what I want to do is just take and barely let her feel my reins lift and my legs come in contact. And when I do, I want her to drop her head. If that pole comes up above the withers, she's going to have a tendency of being more excitable. But you can see her doing a lot of yawning right now, because as soon as you get that pole below the wither, I'm going to ask her to drop again. Tickle her with my, there we go, tickle with my spurs. Tickle with my spurs. I'm going to keep pestering her until she puts her head all the way down like that. I'm going to ask a little bit more. No, not forward. Not forward. Ask, and there. I don't want her to go forward, so I'm going to back her up a step. I'm just holding. I'm not pulling. I'm just holding. There. You can see how dull she can be. There. As soon as she commits there, I'm going to let her have it. So now I'm going to ask her again for her face. So I'm going to reach up and tickle her and ask her. That's what I want right there. The more you can teach your horses to drop their head, especially if they get really excited, the better. This is something I teach all of my horses, my personal horses and the horses that I train to do, is to be able to drop their head with your spurs. You can also teach your horses to collect with your spurs. That is the next thing I teach. That way, if I'm needing to do anything, I can reach up there and touch them and get them to move a certain body part. Or I can reach up there and do like I'm doing right now and get them to lift up their back by touching their belly and getting them to round that back. So right now, this is the first step in teaching them how to collect off your spur, is I'm going to teach them how to drop that nose. Anytime I touch them on the belly of the spur, that means I need you to give me softness. And since right now, the softness is compared or connected to the reins, I want softness in the face. I want to go all the way down. There. I'm only going to give it to her when she drops the head all the way down. All the way down. Don't eat the reins. All the way down. There you go. Good girl. All the way down. All the way down. All the way down. There. There we go. Good girl. She's like, all the way down, I'll go down. So that's great right there. So that is a little trick that you can do with your horses to teach them to be able to drop their head and relax. The next thing I'm going to probably teach, maybe I'll teach tomorrow, is how to free up the shoulder. A lot of people I see ride their horses, and their horses are really, really heavy on their front end. And they don't know how to move their shoulders, free up their shoulders. And even if you kick on a horse, they still don't move that front end. They're kind of draggy on that front end. And what I like to do is use a dressage whip as an extension of my spur without using spurs. And you get a lot better response with these animals than using a spur. You can be able to get them to reach up and move that front end a lot freer if you use a dressage whip over a spur. A spur is a tool that you use. It's an extension of your arm. So in other words, when you ask to see that left eye and that left nose, and you engage a left leg, which means a calf, and then you engage that left spur, boom, what's that doing? It puts pressure for her to move away. Like that. That was awesome. In fact, the video that I just got done doing was teaching her how to do that, because every time I put a spur on her to move, she would move on the spur and put pressure on the spur and keep moving away or moving towards the spur. So her like that, doing that right there was absolutely awesome. She took that one step and crossed it over, which is what I want. Instead of being able to do that and leaning on that spur. Because if you're going up to, right there is awesome. She moved her front end. I was working on that with the last video. But if you got a horse that's coming up to that barrel, and they're really front endy and they're really heavy on that front end, and you go, I need you to get over, and what do? They lock up that front end and they pile drive that barrel. Or they take you into the barrel and whack your leg. You have no control over that shoulder. You know, everybody gets on and run their barrel horses all the time, but they never get back on them and do any kind of work to keep them soft. You know, because when you add speed, you lose control. Every time you run a horse, you break them apart just a little bit. So each time you run them, you need to bring them back together, bring them back into softness. Because every time you run them, you ruin them a little bit. And if you never bring them back in and teach them that softness, you're just going to have issues after issues after issues until they're hitting those barrels and shouldering and then bowing out and all these other things that create injuries. Being able to get those horses to do those 3-point turns beautifully and getting them to lift that shoulder up and getting them to get that hind end underneath of them so they can open themselves up and open that rib cage up so they can actually get in there and get underneath of them and get doing what they're supposed to do instead of dropping that shoulder, bowing out the barrel, and hurting themselves, honestly. So there's little things that you can do, teaching them to move their forehand over, free up the forehand. Everybody thinks it's all in the hind end, but if you got a front end that's all locked up, you can't do nothing with them horses. They'll lock up that front end, grab the bit, and you can't do nothing. So it's really important to do your work and do your homework if you got a horse that you are running, to be able to keep them in tip-top mental shape, because the mental part of it is everything. I don't know how many horses I trained that when I would go and be waiting in the alleyway to run, my horses are like this. Hand on the neck, head down. We're thinking about our run. We're not climbing the walls. All 4 feet are on the ground. We're not rearing at the gate. We're not lunging out of control. All 4 feet are on the ground. They're listening. They're respectful. They're level-headed. And so that way, when I pick up those reins like that, she's like, okay, where are we going? What are we doing? That's control. When you pick up those reins and they just slingshot you, that's not control. And the more those horses learn that they have control over you in certain parts of that arena, that you can't do nothing about it or you won't do nothing about it, they will take full advantage of that because they're just horses. Horses are a creature of habit, and horses are lazy by nature. And if they can get out of working by doing certain things that scare you, by gosh, then they're going to learn that they can do that, whether it be buck you off, rear, or do other little idiosyncrasy things to be able to scare you. They feel that, they intimidate you, and they will keep doing it. Horses are very, very smart. So I think that'll be good for today. That was a great one, is teaching your horses how to drop their head with your spur. You can't ever have a horse too quiet when it comes to barrel racing. Usually horses are a little bit on the opposite. So I'm going to lean forward and ask her to go. You can see I'm asking her to go right there, and she's kind of like, what do you want, right? So that's where this dressage comes in pretty handy, because then all I do is lean forward, squeeze, cluck, and if she doesn't go, I'm going to spank. So lean, woo, there we go. And I'm going to ask her to stop. And I'm going to ask her, I lean forward. There we go, that was a better one. Thing is if you don't ever accelerate any of the cues, they're never going to learn they have to go with the slightest cue. Because I want my horses to be able to move on the slightest cue. And if that slightest cue is this, there, I'm going to release. And that's all I wanted. That was absolutely beautiful. So I hope you like this little quick tip. This is something that everybody, especially if you're a barrel racer, you need to understand and know, is how to have good control over these horses' faces and their shoulders. Because if you have good control over them shoulders and those faces, then it doesn't really matter. See, look at that. Isn't that awesome? If you have good control over these horses, then you're not going to have the accidents that you have, whether it be in the pen, during the run, or anything else. So I hope that helped you guys. Something that you can practice. Bye for now.